It's time for Watts on Wealth Radio with Barry Watts and your host, Ralph Hipp.
You can't control what kind of economy you'll retire into. You can't control what will happen with taxes, inflation, healthcare costs, or the stock market. You can take steps to preserve what you've saved, preserve your wealth, and make sure you'll have income as long as you need it in retirement. Our main money guy, Barry Watts of Springfield's Wealthcare Corporation, is back to discuss those topics with us on the show this Sunday. I'm your host, Ralph Hipp, and delighted you can spend hopefully the whole hour here with us. Hello, Barry. Another journey in the books, this one to Europe. And how is that part of the world? And I'd love to know, how is it financially?
Well, hey, Ralph, thanks so much. I'm glad to be back home. It was journey, that's for sure. The older I get, the harder those trips get. It took 25 and a half hours to get home this time.
Right.
At the end of 25 and a half hours, you're just staggering looking for your bed, you know. But I did spend 2 weeks with my wife and with some family friends in Switzerland, Germany, France, and the Netherlands. This was purely vacation. A lot of times when we travel, it's business related, and then we put some fun in the midst of it as well. But this trip was just purely vacation fun with a cousin of mine. Mom and Dad were supposed to go, and as it turned out, they weren't able to go at the last minute. So it was just us and the cousins. But we had a great time. None of our family really had, well, I suppose I should say it this way. The first of our family to represent us in that part of the country was back in the 1940s when my grandpa, Ralph Cox, actually got shot while he was in Germany. And I remember as a small child looking at the scar on his shoulder where the shrapnel had hit his shoulder, and always liking to draw my finger along and trace that little scar on Papa's shoulder. You can certainly see, though, why the immigrants from that part of Europe decided to settle here in the Ozarks, because, Ralph, it looks a lot like home. And other than the language barrier, I would say that if you're comfortable here in the Missouri Ozarks, you'd be very comfortable in most parts of Germany as well. It's a lovely place, and we were delighted to be there. Switzerland is our favorite country for a number of reasons, but we got to see 4 of them and spend just a brief minute in the 5th country over in London as we changed planes. But it was a good trip, and we really enjoyed it.
I was fascinated because I really love to follow your Facebook page and the pictures you send back stateside. And I saw that Missouri sign on the riverbank. They had Missouri, so they must love Missouri. Was that the Rhine River? Where was that?
It was the Rhine River, and we're just kiting down the river here, and we start seeing these signs pop up on the side, and about the 3rd or 4th sign said Missouri. And you're like, what in the world is that?
That was crazy.
As we watched, I think it was, I don't really know what it was, but it appeared that it was the names of all the big major rivers in the world. And they had posted these signs along the river naming each of them. For example, I remember seeing the Yangtze River. It just said Yangtze. And so I'm assuming that Missouri notation had something to do with the Missouri River. But it was kind of interesting. Another thing I saw while I was over there, Ralph, in the little knick-knack shops where you buy souvenirs and so forth, a number of times I saw Route 66 paraphernalia. I saw an embroidered pillow that had the Route 66 emblem on it, for example. And, you know, we're just, 5,000 miles away from home or something like that. And they're advertising Route 66, which runs right by the house. And I just thought it was kind of funny. But, you know, the world is a lot smaller place than it was in the 40s when my grandpa made his trip over to Europe. So,
yeah. Yeah. And financially, Barry, let me ask you this way. What is the dollar worth over there?
Well,
are they in great peril in Europe?
If you're trading the dollar for euros, you're going to get somewhere around 90 cents, 92 cents for every dollar. So the euro is a little stronger. You know, that's a 10% margin, basically. So that means things cost 10% more over there than they would over here. That's roughly where we are right now. I actually made the whole trip without trading any dollars for euros, which is rather unusual. Usually you try to have some currency in your pocket. And frankly, I intended to and just didn't get it done. And then we got over there and made it through the first day with just our credit cards, and then made it through the second day with just our credit cards. And so eventually I discovered, well, I think we're just going to make the whole trip without having to change any cash. And that worked fine for us. But, you know, when you talk about It was rather unusual, and I had some euros at home, and I forgot to take them. Is what happened. And I'll be going back. I've got actually a business trip back into Italy here in a few weeks, and I'll be sure and take my euros then. But you can actually do an entire trip through Europe without taking any euros with you if you're careful enough and you think it through carefully. While I was on this trip, Ralph, I got to thinking about something, and it had to do with the number of people who get to go on these trips and don't get to go on these trips, and who wants to go on them and who don't want to go on them, and so forth. And I was thinking about when we retire, what the most expensive day of our week is, even before you retire. If you'll think about it right now, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which day costs you the most? You have any idea, Ralph?
Which one?
Well, I think it's Saturday, and here's why. Because if
Here's
you're working, when you're working, you don't have time to go spend money. But on Saturday, you've got time to go to the grocery store. On Saturday, you've got time to go to Lowe's or Home Depot and get whatever you wanted. No, you can go to Sherwin-Williams and get that gallon of paint. And on Saturday, you take your lawnmower down to the shop and get it repaired. So the most expensive day in life for most people is Saturday. And when you retire, every day is Saturday. and so if you'll think about it, you're able to just spend money every day. And certainly when you go on a vacation, vacations are expensive days. You spend a lot of money when you're on vacation.
Emphasize the word spend, right?
Yeah, because it does cost some money to go on those kind of trips. And it got me to thinking about our clients as they retire and whether they were allocating enough money for vacations. And so I want to kind of camp on that idea for just a moment, Ralph. I think everybody likes a vacation. Not everybody plans to go to Europe, and that's fine if you don't go to Europe. We travel quite a lot outside the country, but the country itself is beautiful. And frankly, after getting back home on this last trip, I was like, I don't care if I ever go anywhere else again. Please just let me have my own bed. But it's interesting to see the world and what the world looks like. And I think it makes you a more well-rounded person, which is important to me. We raised our children that way. But the thing that you have to think about is if you want to travel in retirement, you got to consider what the cost is going to be. And most people haven't really thought about that, and they haven't allocated enough money to vacations, in my experience. If you ask them, well, how much will you spend on vacations a year? A lot of times folks say, oh, well, not that much, $1,500, $2,000. Okay. All right. That's fine. That's a fine number if that's your number. But where are you going to go for $1,500, $2,000? I'm thinking that's a couple of trips a year to Branson, and you've got that knocked out. So if you're going to travel internationally or even travel across the U.S. in any broad and extensive way, it's going to cost you more money than that. Now, we do have some clients, shout out to Steve and Annette out there. We do have some clients who pull a little teardrop-shaped camper behind their Jeep. And so it doesn't cost them very much because they do their own cooking. They've got their own sleeping. They just have to buy enough gas for their Jeep. And then they go to Colorado and they camp out in the national forest. So that's a pretty inexpensive way. But, we're not all wired to do that. Some of us prefer to spend the night at the Four Seasons, and that begins to get a little expensive when you do that. So I would just encourage you to think about how much money you're going to need per year to spend on vacations. And maybe if you're going to be modest in that, and it's only going to be $1,500, $2,000 a year, the question becomes, well, are there any big bucket list trips that are going to cost you more? For example, have you ever wanted to go to Australia and you're going to do it as soon as you retire? Or maybe a Rhine River cruise like the one I just got off of. That's going to be an expensive trip. So we need to add more money for bucket list trips. If we're going to spend $2,000 a year normally, but we're going to take this trip to the Rhine one year, maybe we need $15,000 for that particular trip. And then as you think through those things, you'll be developing your retirement income plan. And one of the things that I always ask and try to help people think about is, when you give us your sitting on the porch number, does that include your vacations? Because for most people, it doesn't. And they need to add in there, and well, no, I'm going to spend $5,000 per year on vacations on top of what I need deposited into my bank account to pay for my retirement income. So these are just important things to consider as you plan for your retirement expenses, and as vacations are a part of retirement expenses.
Well, Barry, if some people who are listening in go, well, I wish, it's usually $15,000. I wish we had 15 grand to go on a trip, and we can't, maybe later. A lot of us are worried about where our nation is and where our economy is and what our future will look like. So around the Ozarks, if they're sticking and staying at home and sitting on the porch, what kind of things are they worried about right now?
Well, there's certainly nothing wrong with staying at home on the porch. There was a point in time on this last trip where I would have just given anything to be at home on the porch.
That's
for
right.
a bit because you're just worn out, So nothing wrong with doing that. But I think you've got to be sure that you allocate enough money to do whatever it is that you want to do and whatever you're trying to accomplish. And I would say around the world, and certainly here in the United States, there's a lot of tension in people's minds right now, primarily about inflation and the rising cost of living. Repeatedly, I'm hearing people mention how they need more income than they used to need, how people have retired and gone back to work, taking second jobs in retirement. The cost of living has gone up because of inflation to the extent that it's impacting people being able to take vacations. In fact, just today, I heard about a Fox News poll that said 53% of the people who'd been polled had said that they were not going to be taking vacations this year. And when they ask, well, why aren't you taking vacations? Of the 53% who weren't going to take vacations, 72% of them said they couldn't afford it. And so that is a function of what's going on in the inflation environment and the fact that the cost of living is just costing more and more and more, and people are having to take vacation money and spend it at the grocery store instead. Now, there's a little glimmer of hope out there, I think. One of the glimmers of hopes is that the stock market has had a very good year so far. It's up about 12% in the first 5 months of the year. And that's on top of a really great 2023 where it was up about 21%. So in the past 17 months, we're up about 33% in the market if you're invested in the market. And that has allowed people to forget about 2022 when they lost about 19% in the market. And by the way, Ralph, when you lose 19%, how much do you have to make up to get back to even? Well, most people say, well, 19%. No, that's not true. When you lose 19%, you've actually got to make 24% to get back to even. And because you're in the hole, so you have to dig
just to
your
get
way
back to where you were.
That hole.
Yeah,
that's right. And that's something, if you're not familiar with it, it's called the arithmetic of loss. And here's the way it works. If you think about it, if you had $100 and you lost 50%, how much would you have left?
50.
That's right. $100. If you lose 50%, you'd have $50 left. Now, if you want to grow your $50 back into $100, what percentage growth is it going to require?
120%?
No, only going to require 100% because if you got $50 and you grow it by 100%, now you've got $100. So the lesson there is that if you lose 50%, if you lose 50%, you've got to earn 100% just to be back to where you are. And that's if you're not taking any withdrawals out of your account. If you're taking withdrawals out of your account as it's going down in value, then it costs you more and you have to earn more back to get back to where you were. That's why losing money in retirement is such a difficult thing, and you want to avoid it at all costs if possible.
All right. Hey, if you like the way Barry thinks and that arithmetic he can put to work for you, Barry's number at the WealthCare Corporation is 417-200-3500 right there in Springfield, 417-200-3500. Ralph Hipp here with Barry Watts. You're listening to Watts on Wealth. We're going to take a little break here, and we'll be right back right after this.
Looking to see what Barry Watts can do for you? Just text VISIT to 417-200-3500. That's 417-200-3500.
According to the U.S. debt clock, in the time you hear this commercial, our nation's debt will go up by $1.5 million. That's more than $2 billion a day. Right now, our debt is over $31 trillion and climbing fast. The question is, how do we pay it off? One of the most likely answers is increasing taxes. Now think about your retirement accounts. Do you want to pay taxes on some of that money now when rates are historically low or later when rates are potentially higher? Whether you should pay taxes now or in retirement depends on a lot of things. Barry Watts and the team at WealthCare know what to look for. Barry can help you create a plan so your retirement is as tax efficient as possible. Call 417-200-3500 to set up a tax strategy session with Barry Watts on the Wealth Care team. That's 417-200-3500. When taxes go up, will you be ready? Call now, 417-200-3500.
Investment advisory services are provided by WealthCare Asset Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
You're listening to Watts on Wealth with Barry Watts of WealthCare. If you have questions about what you heard on the show today, you can give Barry and his team a call at 417-200-3500.
Welcome back in. We're continuing with the next part of Watts on Wealth, and I'm Ralph Hipp along with Barry Watson. Barry, you sound great. You don't sound like any jet laggy or anything like that going on. It's good to have you back and sounding good.
Well, thank you, Ralph. I'm excited to be here today. I do feel a little bit jet lagged, but I'll recover in the next few days. It takes me a little while to get over these trips, though.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hey, back to our conversation here. For people around the Ozarks, they're worried about preserving their savings for the future. Can you talk over in this part of the show, what are some of the strategies they may want to think about and working with you on that?
Well, Ralph, preserving your savings, that's a limited concept. I mean, technically, if you took all your savings and you stuck it under your mattress, you have technically preserved it. But what you didn't preserve was your buying power. In fact, because of inflation, your buying power is being eroded each year by the rate of inflation. So on average, it costs you about 3% per year. If you're not earning anything on your account, your ability to buy is reduced by about 3% per year. And in years like we have had recently, it could be as much as 7 or 8 or 9% per year. And so I think more than preserving your savings, it's important to preserve your income and your lifestyle. Because what you want to do is you want to retire at a certain level of income and lifestyle today, and you want to be able to preserve that throughout the rest of your retirement. Now, one of the ways that we help people do that is by dividing their retirement money, their nest egg, their savings, into 3 different buckets. The first of those buckets is what we call the now bucket. That's money you're going to spend in the next 12 months. And if you're going to spend it in the next 12 months, you can't really invest that money. Maybe earn a little interest on it, but that's all. And then we have what we call the soon bucket. The soon bucket money might be money that you're going to spend anywhere from 12 months to 4 or 5 years, something like that. That's money that we're going to have invested so that it's coming due and being mature and ready to be spent on a schedule over the next 4 or 5 years. And then we finish it off with a later bucket. That's 5 years and longer money. That's money that we might expose to a little more market risk and give it time to grow for us in the future. So that's one of the strategies we use to help people preserve their income and their lifestyle, which I think is more important than just preserving your savings.
The now and soon and later buckets, which we've talked about. And Barry, we've talked about this before too. Most people in retirement say they fear running out of money more than they fear death. That's pretty stunning. What are some of the options for helping make sure that we don't outlive our savings in retirement? We talk about this all the time, having your money last as long as you do.
Well, you know, Ralph, one solution for how to be sure that you don't outlive your savings in retirement is simply to die early. So I guess you could say, well, I've got a plan. I'm just going to die early. But the closer you get to that date, people tend to say, well, I don't think quite yet. I'm not ready to do that just exactly. So I think rather than dying early, it's a better idea to perhaps build yourself a guaranteed pension. Build yourself a guaranteed pension with a built-in cost of living over the rest of your life. So you can take the money that you've got, and as you turn that money into income, actually have a scheduled amount of money hit your bank account at the same time every month, increasing that by 2 or 3% per year every year. So you're getting the cost of living adjustments that you might need. And one of the things that I think is so important, really, Ralph, is to have knowledge, to understand how your retirement income plan works. Because when you've got a retirement income plan, then it gives you a sense of knowledge about how much money you've got, about how much money you can spend every year, about how that amount is going to grow over time so that you can offset the cost of inflation. And that increases your internal confidence. And confidence is what we really want to give people in retirement so they can go ahead and pull the trigger, retire, and get on to enjoy that phase of their life to the maximum.
There you go. Barry, we talk about studies and surveys on the show a lot, and a recent retirement income literacy study shows a lot of people still don't know much about certain retirement income tools, which you know about in your toolkit. In fact, the study shows most of us are really clueless when it comes to tools like annuities, let's say, as an income option. What kind of tools are in the tool bag for you?
Well, you brought up annuities. That's a very good place to start the conversation. They're a tool that can be used. They aren't for everybody. And people tend to have really strong reactions to the word annuity, which is, I think, kind of silly. And it's an indication of how little people understand about them. In fact, there's been some research done recently that said that out of a possible knowledge level of 100% on annuities, people close to retirement scored an average of 12%. So if you score 12 out of 100, that means you get an F. You're probably not ready to make a decision about anything if you're only scoring 12 out of 100. So you need to kind of roll back your disinterest in annuities and be willing to learn about how they work. In fact, interestingly enough, this same study on retirement income literacy said that among all the categories that people needed to know about, annuities were the category where they knew the least. They knew more about Medicare, more about life insurance, more about long-term care than they did about annuities. So here's what I'm going to say to you about annuities. Annuities are a tool. Annuities are not a panacea. They're not for everyone. They're not the greatest thing since sliced bread. They also are not from the devil himself. They're just a tool. Now, the reason many people don't like annuities is they can be kind of complex, and they don't get good explanations on their annuities when they invest them. And in some cases, they didn't get everything told to them about the annuity. And so some years later, they discovered there were some kind of a limitation on how much money you could take out of the annuity or something like that. And they hadn't been informed of that. And so they're angered by that. And I don't blame them. I would be angry too. But my point is, that's not the fault of the annuity. That's the fault of the annuity salesperson who probably put you in that annuity. And it's one of the reasons that I often joke, has your annuity salesperson gone into the witness protection program?
Oh,
Because
right.
sometimes they do disappear. But an annuity is a great tool. We use them in our practice. We use them in our family. My parents have got annuities. Annuities are a great solution in the right context. And so we teach people about that context, about how they work, about where they can use them. And if they're appropriate, well, then we use annuities for a portion of their retirement income.
All right. So, thinking about the tools in the toolbox that Barry has, and he can help you out. And that number is 417-200-3500. It's 417 in Ozark land, 200-3500. Well, we have no control over what kind of economy we're going to retire into. Barry, on the next question here, how do you help people around the Ozarks get ready so their retirement money stays intact, even if the economy does go into a nosedive?
Well, I think the big thing, Ralph, is don't allow all of your money to be subject to stock market vagaries. Because when we talk about the economy going into a nosedive, there's really two places that impacts you, either on your inflation, meaning your dollar buys less, or on the fact that you had yourself invested in places where when the stock market goes down, you go down with it. And that's pretty hard to tolerate when you're no longer making a living and you've just got your nest egg to live out of. And so one of the things that we do is in designing retirement income plans for people, we use some tools like guaranteed bank notes, where big banks will guarantee your principal. In fact, I just had one of these mature on my own account, Ralph. I use these personally. And this particular one that I had mature, I had owned it for 5 years. And the way it worked, they're all different. So you can't count on anyone being exactly like this. But the one I had, the way it worked is it guaranteed me that I would get all of my principal back. And that was the only guarantee that I had. And it was going to tie my performance to a stock market index like the S&P 500. Well, at the end of 5 years, when it matured, I got all my principal back and I got enough earnings back that my average earnings rate over that 5-year period of time had been a little better than 8% per year. Now, again, you can't be guaranteed of that. The only guarantee in that particular case was that you'd get all your principal back. But 8% per year over 5 years, that works pretty well when you don't have any risk to principal. And so those are just the types of solutions that we bring to the table that may or may not fit any given person, but they'll fit some people. And we're always looking to see, Ralph, what shoe it is that fits your foot and to help clients put on the pair of shoes in retirement that they can wear most comfortably.
Very good. Very good. Barry, sometimes we have that notion we're going to dig into our nest egg of pulling out what we've stuffed in there to save for retirement. And that's really not the point of having a nest egg to draw from, but creating income and pursuing growth in their portfolio. And how can you help us balance all that out with preservation?
Well, Ralph, I think it's kind of the wrong question. How can you help me be sure and preserve my portfolio in retirement? Really, is that why you worked for 40 years, so that you could retire and preserve your portfolio? I don't think so. I think you worked so that you could have an enjoyable retirement lifestyle. And so let's figure out what that looks like. What are you going to do in retirement? Are you going to travel? Do you need a new fishing boat if that's going to be your thing? Is it going to take a motorhome? How are you going to sleep when you are traveling if you're going to travel? And let's figure out, what is your lifestyle going to cost per year? We start, of course, with our famous question, what's your sitting on the porch number? If all you did is go home and sit on the porch, how much needs to be deposited into the bank account every month just to pay all the bills, make sure everything's covered? And then let's add some to that for travel, for example, or whatever other kinds of expenses it's going to be. Let's figure out what that's going to cost per year. And then from that number annually, we can subtract out any pensions you've got, your Social Security, obviously, and we figure out how much of that number has to come from your own personal savings. And then we can figure out, do you have enough saved up in resources to get you all the way to age 100? So we don't start with how do we balance preservation is not the question. The question is, how do we have the retirement lifestyle that we want and last all the way to age 100? Is there any way we can achieve that? And if there is, super. And if there isn't, it's better to know it now so we can make whatever adjustments are necessary.
And be able to take trips like Barry just took with the family, if that's part of it, and you can do that. Is that the retirement you want? So talk about that with Barry, all kinds of tools in the toolkit at 417-200-3500. With the money that you have put away and the money that'll be streaming in, your income, insurance, tax strategies, healthcare costs, your investments, legacy planning, all these pieces go into that comprehensive retirement plan. So discuss this with Barry. You can text visit today at 417-200-3500 or call Barry first thing tomorrow at that same number there in Springfield. Barry, it's time for the news. We'll see what the news is, and we'll be back and discuss more of our conversation of our big topic today. And we'll be back in just a moment.
We all want the freedom to do the things that make us happy, especially in retirement. To get help planning for a future in retirement, give Barry a call today at 417-200-3500. That's 417-200-3500. More Watts on Wealth coming up.
Imagine for a moment that an intense storm is pounding your house. Will your roof leak? Will the siding peel away? Will your basement flood? If your house is properly built and maintained, you'll be fine. But what about your 401k or your investments? The stock market has had a pretty good run the last few years, but is its current turmoil making you feel uneasy? Are you confident your portfolio is built to weather a financial storm? Now may be a great time to get a second opinion on your retirement plan. Call Barry Watts and the team at WealthCare at 417-200-3500 now. They'll examine your portfolio and show you if your investments are in need of some weatherproofing. Call Barry Watts and the team at WealthCare today at 417-200-3500 to get your no-obligation second opinion. Don't let your retirement get caught in the rain. Call 417-200-3500. Investment advisory services are provided by WealthCare Asset Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk.
Welcome back in, along with J. Barry Watts, the main retirement designer of the WealthCare Corporation. This is Ralph Hipp. You are listening to Watts on Wealth, and by the way, during the week, a few times a week on KY3, watch for Barry and me on your big TV. We're glad you're with us on the radio side. It's easy to make assumptions about what goes into your legacy plan, which we'll talk about now. Barry's going to help make it clear for you as we dive into the basics of creating a lasting legacy for your family. Barry, you have a very interesting definition of a legacy, but what are some of the basic money questions we ask ourselves about legacy and estate planning?
Well, before we get to money questions, I always ask this question: how do you want to be remembered? And
Right.
most people haven't ever really thought about that. I mean, they've lived their whole life. They're now 60 or 70 years old. They got most of their life in the rearview mirror. And when you say, how do you want to be remembered? They say, well, I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. I've thought about it myself. And I will tell you that I don't want to be remembered for being the greatest retirement planner on the planet. I don't want to be remembered for being the wealthiest man in my town. I want to be remembered for matters of faith. What I want my children and grandchildren to say about me is I want them to say, Dad, he really loved Jesus and he was serious about following him. He wasn't perfect, but he was serious about following him. And I want my grandchildren to say, I remember when Grandpa used to sit with me on the porch and he would tell me about Jesus and about how important it was that I trust Jesus and walk with Jesus. That's my legacy, Ralph. That's what's most important to me. The money stuff is on top of that. And it's very important to understand the difference between estate planning and legacy planning. You see, estate planning is how you get your money and your assets and your property to the next generation. Legacy planning is how you get those closely held values, the things that money can't buy and death can't take away, how you get those to the next generation. And so I think it's important to think about these in two different categories. Let's talk about your estate plan, the things we need to do to get the assets passed on, but let's also spend some hard time thinking about the legacy, because ultimately what you leave in legacy is more important than what you leave in your estate.
Well said. And I love when you talk about that, Barry, and very philosophical and the faith that goes behind your answer. So let's break that in half. And how do you talk to people all around Springfield about legacy planning as part of that overall retirement plan?
Well, so legacy planning, there again, those things that money can't buy and death can't take away.
Right.
What is it that you want your children and grandchildren to say about you after you're gone? What do you want them to remember? If you could today, 30 years before you die, if you could give them your deathbed speech, what would you say to them? What's going to be most important? Would you say to them, hey, be sure and work longer hours, work harder, save more money, be sure you move to a nicer neighborhood? And I don't think anybody would say those kind of things. I think there are some precious things that you would want to communicate and convey to your kids and to your grandkids. And so let's help you figure out what those things are. And we've got a series of questions that we ask to get people to talking about these things while we actually interview them on videotape and record some of this. And my idea with all of that, and we're still developing this, is simply that when my kids gather once a year for the family reunion when I'm gone, and they gather to receive their checks, their distribution from the family's estate, I want them to have to listen to Grandpa on the video screen telling them once again what was most important and reciting to them again the importance of faith and values. And you have to listen to that in order to get your check. So that's kind of the way that I intend to manage it. But
Very
that's a part
important.
that's how we manage the legacy planning portion of that. The estate planning portion is really pretty easy, I think. I mean, what do you got and where do you want it to go? And let's get it there in the simplest way possible. And let's not over complexify. Is that a word? George Bush
we
would
made
have
it
said
one.
that way.
Yeah.
George.
Well, it's part of your strategery.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
Yeah,
so let's.
yeah.
our estate strategery is not to over complexify it. So
I got
let's
you.
make it
I
as
understood
simple
that,
as
Barry.
we possibly
Yeah.
can. I was afraid you did.
Whoever said, I wish I'd spent more time at the office and less time with my family. Hopefully nobody ever says that, especially around Springfield. Barry, talk to us about the benefits of having a solid strategic legacy plan. I just use the word strategic.
Well, I think, again, we have to parse out legacy plan versus estate plan. I
Yes.
think it's important, though, to be ready for the unexpected. Be ready for the unexpected because it happens. People just die. Boom, one day you weren't looking for it, or they go into long-term care or something like that. So while we're healthy today, let's make the plan. Let's be sure that a part of that is speaking to our legacy, which is preserving our values. But let's also make sure that we make certain our loved ones are taken care of. Let's make sure we preserve our wealth and that we pass our wealth on appropriately using estate planning tools, and that we preserve our finances for those generations. You know, Ralph, I'm not too worried about myself financially. I'm very concerned about Kelly. I want to be sure that she is taken care of. And that is my number one goal when I think about my own retirement estate plan, is just making sure that there's enough for Kelly. And then beyond that, whatever can go to the kids, well, then that's fine. But I'm not wrapped up in making certain that happens, though I suspect that it will happen. So just sitting down and thinking about what you want to occur, writing it down and committing to it is very important. And then there are documents that you can draft, wills and trusts and things of that nature, that can help you avoid the costly missteps that can result in overtaxation, save you tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of taxes if you do that correctly.
All right. So to do it correctly, and repeating Barry's number at the Wealth Care Corporation, you can leave a message today or text visit. It's 417-200-3500, or call them first thing in the morning on estate and legacy planning, especially what we're talking about right now. When we put these two together, Barry, what happens if estate and legacy planning, it's sort of botched, the planning isn't done right? What happens?
Well, my goodness, it's a great calamity if it's not done correctly. The calamity can be financial in that it can cost you a tremendous amount in tax liabilities that you haven't thought of. And a lot of people say, well, Barry, I won't have any estate taxes. My estate isn't that large. Oh, really? Do you have any money in your IRA? Well, yes, of course I do. Well, how much is in your IRA? Well, I've got about $1 million in my IRA. No, you don't. You've really only got about $650,000. Uncle Sam has $350,000 in your IRA. And the minute you die, that money is going to be due to Uncle Sam. So do you have a plan for paying for that? Do you have a plan for helping your kids to pay for that? Or are they just going to have to dig down deep in their pocket? And if they're in the top tax bracket, have to pay at a rate higher than you would have had to pay. So there are all sorts of estate kinds of issues. But then there's also the family squabbles and conflicts that can develop and result in broken relationships. And most all of us know stories of where relationships did get broken when it wasn't necessary, but somebody in the family was a knucklehead. And I can't guarantee you that you can avoid that. But I can tell you this, if you have written down and put your John Hancock on what you want done, and people who are distributing your estate, the people you've selected for that, are abiding by your wishes and do it the way you wanted it done, well, then there's no reason for your family to be in any tension about that. Because what's worse than losing money is losing relationships into eternity.
Barry, and I've just got a yes or no question. Have you talked to some families where there are family members that just don't speak to anymore after all this?
Absolutely.
You've absolutely met probably many families like that.
Yes, it's not unusual for that to occur.
Yeah. How does the team at the Wealth Care Corporation approach this issue of estate and legacy planning?
Well, we approach it like big boys and girls. And what that means is we talk openly about the fact that someday you're going to die. And the most important thing you can do to prepare for dying is to be sure that you are prepared spiritually to die, that you know where you're going to spend eternity. I do know. And I will spend eternity in heaven, not because Barry's a good boy or has done anything grand or marvelous, but because when Jesus went to the cross, he took all of my sin upon him, and I was cloaked in all of his righteousness. That is what I am trusting to make eternity right for me. Now, beyond that, we need to talk also in practical ways about the family. Are all the kids on level footing? Or maybe you've got one family member who just doesn't make good financial decisions, and we may need to handle their portion of the money differently than we handle the other kid's portion of the money, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. And so thinking about it now while you're healthy, putting all of those things in order and committing them into documents that say this is the way that it shall be done, and having that estate plan verified by an attorney who prepares it for you so it gets accomplished Well, that's really, 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 really critical. And at the Wealth Care Corporation, we help people to line all those things up, have those more difficult conversations, and then put them in touch with the professionals they need to get those documents prepared and make sure that their assets go where they want them to when they die.
Barry, I was thinking as you were talking about, in our faith journey, no matter where you are on your faith journey, friends, when you're in times of turbulence, you just turn that over to your faith. And it's sort of the same thing, or I want to ask you if it is turning over our finances and, getting that confidence that you want us to have, the confidence in retirement, kind of like a leap of faith?
Well, I don't know. I had never thought about it in that way.
We just
Ralph.
kind of turn it over and feel better about it?
Well, I think a leap of faith implies lack of knowledge and just a blind,
Or that there would be a gap in there.
So, no, I don't think that's the case. In fact, we had some people just this past week who brought a couple of $1 million for us to manage. And they had been working on this for probably 4 or 5 months before they finally brought the money. And what they said is the first time we talked to you guys, it made a lot of sense, but it makes even more sense today. So their faith, their confidence, their knowledge has been growing and expanding over these months as we've helped them understand better and better the things that they need to accomplish. So I would like to say, Ralph, that it just comes down to good decision making and being able to understand the things you need to do, and then have confidence that you're talking with the right person. And ultimately, there is some faith involved in that, but I think that you can ferret out who's feeding you baloney and who's speaking to you truthfully and with integrity. And I would encourage you to pursue those kinds of advisors in your life.
All right. Well, we hope it's Barry on this Sunday. Thanks for listening to the Watts on Wealth radio show. Barry's number is 417-200-3500 right there in Springfield. Barry will take a break and be back with the final portion of our show right after these messages.
Retirement planning doesn't have to be complicated. Barry Watts can help you simplify it with his kit. In it, you'll find a copy of his retirement income planning booklet, plus information on taxes, Social Security, income, and more. To get your wealth care kit, text KIT to 417-200-3500. That's KIT to 417-200-3500.
Imagine for a moment that an intense storm is pounding your house. Will your roof leak? Will the siding peel away? Will your basement flood? If your house is properly built and maintained, you'll be fine. But what about your 401k or your investments? The stock market has had a pretty good run the last few years, but is its current turmoil making you feel uneasy? Are you confident your portfolio is built to weather a financial storm? Now may be a great time to get a second opinion on your retirement plan. Call Barry Watts and the team at WealthCare at 417-200-3500 now. They'll examine your portfolio and show you if your investments are in need of some weatherproofing. Call Barry Watts and the team at WealthCare today at 417-200-3500 to get your no-obligation second opinion. Don't let your retirement get caught in the rain. Call 417-200-3500. Investment advisory services are provided by WealthCare Asset Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk.
Looking to see what Barry Watts can do for you? Just text VISIT to 417-200-3500. That's 417-200-3500.
Welcome back in, and this is former KSPR TV newsman Ralph Hipp. Gosh, I don't know if you remember me being on TV in Springfield, but I'm on TV in Springfield again with Barry on KY3 and the Watts on Wealth TV show, along with Barry Watts and Watts on Wealth, the radio show. Well, for this final part, there are always words of wisdom standing the test of time. We want Barry to go over some timeless advice for you to keep in mind. Timeless advice and some great quotes, and we love this part, Barry. Let's start with a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I put Ralph first because we Ralphs have to stick together, so we got a Ralph in here.
My grandpa was Ralph, so I understand that.
You said that, yeah. Grandpa Ralph, he was the one in Germany, was that right?
He was, yes. He was
in the 40s, yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Well, this Ralph Waldo Emerson, he says, the desire of gold is not for gold. And I kind of see where you would be going with this on your answer, Barry. The desire for gold is not for gold. It's for the means of freedom and benefit. So what does that tell you about how we ought to think about our money, our gold for retirement? Well, and not necessarily gold either.
Well, but actually, I want to start by talking about gold because it's so popular in the news today. And by the way, gold investments have been doing very well lately. Some people, though, just want gold because they heard an advertisement on the radio station that told them they should have some gold in their IRA. And I want to say to you, I think that is a bunch of baloney. Don't get wrapped up and swept up by these people who are trying to sell gold on the radio and on TV. While there's nothing wrong with owning gold, and I personally own some gold, I didn't buy it that way. I don't have the bullion. I didn't turn over all of my IRA account to gold. It's just one of the many things that we own in a balanced portfolio. And so as you think about the balanced portfolio in your retirement account, Ralph, Emerson said that people weren't really interested in the gold. They wanted the freedom and the benefit. Well, I think that's absolutely true. The purpose of your retirement money is to purchase the freedom to spend your days as you want, with the people you want, doing what you want.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, there's no award given out. Let's raise the poor man's head while he lays in the casket, and let's put a medallion around his neck that says he died with $3 million. Congratulations. You know, what is that old joke? I've never seen a U-Haul pulling, or a hearse pulling U-Haul.
A hearse pulling a U-Haul never happens.
Yeah. So it's about spending your days like you want to, where you want to, with who you want to, doing the things you want to do them. That's the point that Emerson was making. And that's the purpose of accumulating retirement wealth so that you can retire. And we want to help you retire in confidence, looking forward to how to spend that wealth over the rest of your days.
Yeah, I wanted to start with that one, and good answer on that. But you know, one Family Feud, good answer, Barry. That was a good answer on Ralph Waldo Emerson's quote. Well, now an easy one from our friend Thomas Jefferson, who never had a credit card, by the way. Thomas Jefferson said, "Never spend your money before you've earned it." Can you talk about how crucial is it to live within our means before and during retirement?
Well, Ralph, this is a hard one to talk about because it is so obvious to me. And yet, many of us were not raised properly, I think, to understand living in your means. And certainly there's a generation out there now with the expansion of credit and people you just slide the card. And if you still got the card, you must still have money that you can spend. I think people lose track of what they're spending and don't understand. When I was a kid, one of the things that my parents taught me was that if your outgo exceeds your income, then your upkeep will become your downfall. Let me say that again.
Say that again. I was going to say,
if your outgo exceeds your income, then your upkeep becomes your downfall. So you simply cannot spend money you do not have. Stop it. Every elected representative in Washington, hear me clearly. You can't spend money you don't have. Stop it. Oh, heavens, how passionately I feel about that. And, you know, I stand on some pretty good authority when I say that, because the Bible itself says in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7, the borrower is the slave of the lender. The borrower is the slave of the lender. So every time you spend what you don't have, you're inviting someone else to put another set of handcuffs on your wrist. And many people have an entire arm full of handcuffs because they've spent money that they didn't have. And you have to stop that behavior. If you don't stop that behavior, you'll never be able to retire, and you'll fail in retirement early.
It'll be your downfall. Here's one from Confucius. Confucius say, when prosperity comes, do not use all of it. I'm thinking he was looking ahead to the future, these IRAs where you have to preserve 1/3 of that for taxes to the government. I think that's where Confucius was going. But another one on making prudent financial decisions. How do you make sure we have a strategy for spending our retirement money so we don't use all of it too quickly? Or do you think he was talking about IRAs?
I don't know if Confucius was thinking IRAs or not, but the point is well taken. When prosperity comes, do not use all of it. Always save a little back for a rainy day. If you'll think about how nature works, Ralph, let's say you've got a field full of corn, 40 acres of corn, and you go sow 40 acres of corn and you get a corn crop off of it. If you then eat all of the corn that is in your corn crop, what are you going to sow next year? You have to save some back as seed corn for the following year. And that's what you're doing in your IRA. Even though Confucius probably didn't know about an IRA, your IRA is your seed corn. You're saving back a portion of what you are earning. And so the way we help people figure that out is we help them develop a retirement income plan. How much money are you going to need in retirement? And when do you want it to start? What age are you going to retire? And we're going to make it last all the way till we're 100 years old. And what are your sources of income from Social Security and from pensions and from maybe you've got a rent house or maybe you've got a farm lease that somebody's paying you cash rent on your farm or maybe you've got an oil well in the backyard. I don't know. But let's find out all your sources of income and how much of your seed corn you're going to need to be eating into. Because as long as you die with a little seed corn still in the bank, then I think you have a successful retirement and you were able to accomplish the things that you wanted to. And that's what's most important. You just don't want to get to age 85 and be out of money because those last 10 or 15 years can be really hard if there's no cash to spend. And there certainly won't be any vacations in line for you at that point.
That is correct. All righty. And Theodore Roosevelt, his quote is, Barry, if you could kick the person in the pants responsible for most of your trouble, you wouldn't sit for a month. How are we getting in our own way on making wise decisions about our cash?
Happens all the time. I see people
all the time.
People overthink it and they want to overanalyze it. And let's just be honest, they don't have the critical skills to do that analysis at the level that it needs to be done. Or sometimes they aren't even going to do any analysis. They just want to think about it. And you say, well, okay, that's fine. I'm in favor of thinking about it. In fact, when people come to see us, we actually give them a journal in which to take notes, and we call it your Think It Over Journal. We want you to think about things. And so we'll say to them sometimes when they say, well, I want to think about it. Okay, so let's list out the things we're going to think about. What are they? And a lot of times the answer is, well, I don't know. I don't have anything. I'm not sure. Well, that's not really thinking about it. That's just refusing to make a decision. And refusing to make a decision is making a decision. And so what you've got to realize is time is money. Every month that you spend with inflation going faster than your money is growing, that costs you. Every month that you miss out on the stock market and the growth that it provides, that costs you. As it happens this year, if you had on January 1 been going to think about it and you were still thinking about it, well, your accounts would be worth about 12% less than they are today, perhaps. And so the point is, there's a time to get clarity, figure out what it is you need to do, and then strike. Make the decision you need to make, do the things you need to do, and take action. That's what's critically important.
Barry, let me have this last quote from our first president. If we can check in with our first president, George Washington, and here's what old GW said. And this is referring to what we talked about before. Quote, we must consult our means rather than our wishes. What can this say about Washington? I mean the city, not the guy. About setting a budget, covering all those expected expenses in retirement.
Well, I read that quote from Washington and I just think, my goodness, how have these people in the city of Washington so misunderstand the point? Because George, for whom the city's name, said, consult your means, not your wishes. How much money do you have that you can spend? So surely all of us tend, particularly in America, toward what we would call a champagne appetite and a beer budget. You just have to be a big boy and girl and realize that. And maybe it's possible that you can have champagne in retirement, but the only way that you can know that for sure is if you have built a retirement income plan that calculates out how much you're going to need to spend every month in retirement and then shows you on an annual basis how much money you're spending and how that is eroding your retirement nest egg, or maybe it's still allowing your retirement nest egg to grow. And so it's important that you work off of your retirement nest egg, how much you have, not what you wish you had. Because what is it they say? If wishes were horses, then beggars would ride. We're not going to build a retirement plan on wishes. We're going to build a retirement plan on what's possible. And we want you to be able to retire with confidence, knowing that what is possible for you is going to come into fruition.
Barry, in closing up another terrific show with you, I've got to mention, I just saw Cary Grant on North by Northwest, that old Alfred Hitchcock movie. It's been redone, probably was shown again in Springfield, where they have the chase around Mount Rushmore. And I got to say, we got in quotes from all four of the guys on Mount Rushmore on our segment. So I'm proud of us doing that. And some wisdom from George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and TR and Abraham Lincoln. And thanks for helping me get through that. And through the whole hour, Barry, any final thoughts for our friends out there as we wrap it up for another week?
Well, I always like to say, be sure and drink upstream from the herd.
Indeed. And Hey, we hope that better days are ahead, especially for you, friends. Thanks for joining us for the Watts on Wealth radio show. Watch for us on TV. A lot more detail over there. This is Ralph Hipp, and for Barry Watts and the whole team at the WealthCare Corporation, once again, it's 417-200-3500. Tune in your dial to this number on the station right here. We'll see you next Sunday.
Thank you for stopping by Watts on Wealth. If you would like Barry and his team to help you make a plan to get to and through retirement, or would simply like a second opinion on your current plan, give us a call today at 417-200-3500. That's 417-200-3500. And join us again next week for Watts on Wealth.
WealthCare Corporation provides tax strategy, tax compliance, accounting, and insurance services through its affiliate American Tax Strategies, LLC. Investment advisory services are provided by WealthCare Asset Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Past performance never guarantees future results. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for information and entertainment purposes only and should not be used as the basis for personal financial decisions without first consulting a qualified advisor. The information and opinions you've heard are believed reliable but cannot be guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness.